My stepson said I was a sponsor, not a father. I cut every expense and sent him back to his real dad. He was greeted with empty hands. My stepson once looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not a father, you're just a sponsor." It wasn't anger in his voice. It was certainty, the kind of calm cruelty only youth can deliver. He stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, the glow from its screen washing his face in that ghost blue light. Behind him, the morning sun fell across the marble counters I'd paid for, the same counters Sarah had insisted on when we remodeled. "It'll make the place feel warmer," she'd said. But there was nothing warm in that room. The refrigerator hummed like a witness trying not to speak. Sarah stood by the window, sipping her wine though it was barely noon, pretending to check her messages. She didn't even look at me, just raised her glass to her lips, eyes fixed on the distance as if what Nick had said didn't deserve an answer. In that silence, something final settled between us. I realized, with a kind of slow, dizzy calm, that the last 6 years had been a lie. All the birthdays, the car rides, the late-night talks about college, the endless bills paid without question, illusions. Transactions wrapped in affection. I wasn't family. I was funding family. And Nick knew it. He stood there, shoulders squared, smirk tugging at the edge of his mouth like he'd just solved an equation. Maybe he had. Maybe the math of our life together had always been that simple. His needs minus my money equaled his comfort. The words replayed in my head, quiet at first, then louder. "You're not a father, you're just a sponsor." Something inside me went still. I'd heard small versions of it before, in fragments over the years, little comments dropped like crumbs. "Real dads don't need reminders. Alex would have let us go. Mom says you worry too much." Every jab disguised as a joke, every smirk at the dinner table when I tried to lay down rules. I told myself it was normal, teenage rebellion, growing pains, but now I understood. Those weren't jokes. They were warnings. The signs had always been there, like hairline cracks running through a wall you keep repainting instead of fixing. I thought back to the first time I met them, Nick and his sister, Emma. She was shy, polite, he was already skeptical. He shook my hand like he was humoring me, eyes darting to Sarah as if to confirm whether this handshake was part of some test. That was the beginning. From that moment on, I was under evaluation. Every gesture, every word, measured against the ghost of their father. Alex, the man who had walked out but somehow still ruled the house through nostalgia and pity. The comparisons came early. Sarah didn't mean to make them, I think, but she did. Alex used to take them to the lake every summer. Alex was more relaxed about curfews. Even when she was trying to praise me, "You're more reliable than Alex ever was." It came out like a reminder that I was filling a vacancy, not a role. Still, I tried. God, I tried. When Nick's bike chain snapped on the way to school, I fixed it in the driveway before work, grease under my nails for days. When Emma's phone broke, I replaced it the same night because she said she needed it for homework. I told myself these things mattered, small acts of service, small proofs that I was building something real. But no matter what I did, I was always one breath away from being the outsider. At school events, they'd introduce me as Mom's husband, never my stepdad. Teachers would smile politely, the way people do when they don't know what category you fit into. During family photos, I was often the one holding the camera. The house itself carried the memory of Alex. His old tools still hanging in the garage, his books still on the shelf, his face appearing in framed photos Sarah never had the courage to put away. Sometimes, when Nick came home late, I'd hear him on the phone laughing with someone, and I'd catch fragments. "Yeah, Mom's husband. Yeah, the guy who paid for the trip." Always that word, paid, followed me like a shadow. But that morning, in the kitchen, Nick finally said the quiet part out loud. "You're not a father. You're just a sponsor." The truth was naked, and it fit too well. I looked at Sarah, hoping, just once, that she'd step in, that she'd tell him to stop, to respect the man who'd held this family together when his real father disappeared for months at a time. But she just turned her face toward the window, eyes empty, like a woman watching her own lie collapse. In that moment, something colder than anger took root inside me. It wasn't rage. Rage burns out. This was quieter, steadier, a kind of clarity that doesn't fade. I saw the kitchen differently then. The granite counters weren't proof of stability, they were evidence. Every tile, every appliance, every polished surface had a price tag, and all of them bore my name. This wasn't a home. It was a ledger. I wanted to say something back, something sharp enough to match the wound he just opened. But the words didn't come. There's a kind of humiliation so deep it silences you. You don't fight it, you absorb it. It becomes a fact you have to live with. Nick went back to scrolling his phone like the conversation was over. Maybe it was. Sarah set her glass down and muttered something about needing air. She left the room without looking at me. The sound of her heels faded down the hall, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of my own heartbeat. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up budgeting tuition payments while she slept beside me. I thought about the car I bought Nick when he turned 16, the down payment on Emma's future college plan, the weekend spent fixing things around the house so we could save a little. Every sacrifice had been an investment in belonging, and now I understood it had been a bad investment. I wasn't part of this family. I was financing it. That realization hurt in a way I can't quite describe. It wasn't the loss of love. It was the loss of meaning. Everything I'd done, every hour worked, every compromise swallowed, was for a role that had never truly existed. I had been the placeholder for another man's absence. Later that day, I found myself walking through the house like a stranger. The photos on the walls looked different. The smiling faces seemed staged, rehearsed. In one picture, from Emma's birthday, Nick stood beside me with his arms crossed, barely touching my shoulder. I hadn't noticed it before. Now it felt like a warning printed in color. I sat in the living room, the same room where we'd opened Christmas presents, where I'd built their shelves, painted their walls, fixed their lights. The house creaked around me, familiar sounds that suddenly felt foreign. I realized how fragile everything had been, how all these years I'd been clinging to a structure built on someone else's foundation. When Sarah finally came back, she didn't mention what Nick had said. She asked if I'd eaten. Her tone was soft, practiced, almost apologetic, the way people speak to the injured without wanting to acknowledge the wound. I told her I wasn't hungry. That night, we slept in silence. She turned her back to me, and I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the creaks of the old beams. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't spoken, why she'd let him say it, but I already knew the answer. She didn't want to lose him. She'd rather lose me quietly than risk his anger. As I lay there, I understood that the balance of our family had never been real. It was a performance, one I had funded, directed, and believed in long after the actors stopped caring. When I finally closed my eyes, the phrase came back again, steady and precise, the way he'd said it. "You're not a father, you're just a sponsor." And I realized, maybe for the first time, that he wasn't wrong. After that morning, something in me went quiet. Not angry, not defeated, just quiet. There's a kind of silence that follows betrayal. Not the loud kind with shouting and slammed doors, but the kind that seeps into the walls, into your breath, into the way you look at the people you once loved. That's what settled over me in the days that followed. Sarah pretended nothing had happened. Nick carried on as if his words had been a passing remark, just another casual cruelty tossed into the air. But the house remembered. Every sound felt sharper. The scrape of his shoes on the floor, the click of Sarah's wine glass on the counter, the hum of the dishwasher at midnight. Even laughter felt wrong, like it belonged to another household entirely. I thought back to every ride to practice, every bike chain I fixed, every gadget I bought, every time I signed a check believing it might earn me respect. But respect doesn't come with receipts. I learned that the hard way. When Nick's friends came over, I'd hear them whisper in the next room, "That's not his dad." One of them would say, "That's just his mom's husband." They never said it to my face, but they didn't have to. The words carried through walls. And Nick never corrected them. He just laughed, like it was a joke everyone was in on except me. At school events, teachers still called me Mr. Collins, though the kid's last name was Morgan. I'd stand there, smile, shake hands, tell myself it didn't matter. but it did. Every time. Every syllable felt like a reminder that I was the man standing on the wrong side of the family portrait. I used to believe that patience was the answer, that if I kept showing up, kept paying, kept fixing, kept forgiving, one day they'd see me for who I really was. But patience is just another word for denial when it's spent on people who don't want you. It wasn't just Nick. Even Emma, sweet as she was, started pulling away. She was quieter about it. More polite, more careful, but I could feel it. The distance. The way she hesitated before calling me Dad. The way she started asking her mother for things she used to ask me. Children can smell weakness. They sense when loyalty becomes optional. And Sarah was the worst of them all because she never raised her voice. Her betrayals were soft-spoken, wrapped in reason. When I told the kids to clean up, she'd repeat my words in a lighter tone, turning command into suggestion. "Come on, guys, let's help Tom out," she'd say, as if I weren't standing right there. That's what she did. She translated me, diluted me, made me palatable to them, as though my presence were too harsh, too foreign, too undeserved. The nights grew longer, the dinners colder, the distance wider. One evening, I came home from work later than usual. The house smelled like takeout. Boxes on the counter, greasy paper spilling from the trash. They'd eaten without me again. The TV played in the background, some show I didn't recognize. Nick sat on the couch, legs sprawled, shoes still on. Sarah was beside him, laughing softly at something on her phone. I stood in the doorway watching them, invisible. When she finally noticed me, her smile faltered. "Oh," she said, "you're home." That was all. No warmth, no welcome. Just acknowledgement like a neighbor passing by. I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The noise from downstairs carried through the floor. Laughter, the clink of glasses, the occasional burst of music. My name was never mentioned. It was there, in that dim bedroom, that I realized something had broken beyond repair. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I went down to the kitchen and poured myself a drink. The amber light from the refrigerator painted the room in a dull glow. I took out a folder from the cabinet, the one where I kept our bills, receipts, and payments, and spread them across the dining table. There it was. 6 years of evidence. Tuition payments, medical bills, sports club fees, family vacations, birthday gifts, groceries, mortgage payments. Nearly $30,000 poured into a life that refused to see me. Each line item was another piece of the illusion I'd been maintaining, a record of every time I tried to buy my way into belonging. I sat there for hours, staring at the numbers, feeling the slow, methodical collapse of everything I'd built. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was something colder, cleaner, like clarity finally settling after years of confusion. When Sarah came down around midnight, she stopped in the doorway. Her hair was loose, her robe tied lazily around her waist. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice soft, uncertain. "Just looking," I said. "At what?" "At proof." She stepped closer, eyes scanning the table, the bills, the receipts, the records of every sacrifice. Her expression flickered, somewhere between guilt and annoyance. "Tom," she said quietly, "you don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Keep score." I almost laughed. Keep score. As if I hadn't already lost the game years ago. I looked at her and asked, "Did you hear what Nick said this morning?" Her eyes dropped. "He's a teenager. He says things he doesn't mean." I waited. She didn't add anything else. Not a defense. Not an apology. "Do you think he's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated, just long enough for the truth to spill through her silence. Then she said, "You're not their father, Tom." No anger, no emotion, just fact. The words landed like a final nail. Not shouted, not cruel, simply true in the way a verdict is true after the jury has gone home. I nodded. There was nothing left to say. She went back upstairs, leaving me alone with the evidence of my own foolishness. I sat there until the bottle was nearly empty, until the receipts blurred under my eyes. When I finally turned off the light, I already knew what I was going to do. The next morning, I told her. I found her in the kitchen pouring coffee. The same routine as always, sunlight spilling across the table like nothing had changed. No more extras, I said. She looked up, confused. What do you mean? No more tuition, no more gifts, no more vacations. I'll pay for the house, the bills, the food, but that's it. From now on, the rest is Alex's responsibility. She froze, mug halfway to her lips. Alex. Yes, their real father. The one they keep reminding me about. For a second, she looked like she might protest, but then she didn't. Maybe she understood there was no argument left to make. Her voice was flat. You can't just cut them off. I'm not cutting them off, I said. I'm giving them what they asked for. When Nick found out, the reaction was immediate. He stormed into the room that evening, waving a piece of paper. His tuition invoice. His face was red. His voice trembling with outrage. What the hell is this? The payment bounced. You're supposed to handle this. I didn't even look up from the newspaper. Ask your real dad. What? You heard me. He stared at me, stunned. You can't just stop paying. You promised. I promised as a father, I said. But you told me I'm not one. Sarah tried to intervene. Emma cried. But I didn't move. They wanted a sponsor. The sponsor just ended the deal. Later, I sat alone in the garage, listening to the rain hit the roof. The sound was steady, almost peaceful. The decision felt clean, not spiteful, not vengeful. Just necessary. I had spent 6 years trying to buy respect, and all it had earned me was silence. So I stopped buying. The house felt different that night. Lighter. For the first time, I could breathe. It didn't take long for the silence to crack. By the third day, the house was trembling with it. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, but the kind that waits to explode. I could feel it in the way Sarah moved around me, careful, cautious, measuring every breath like she was living with a bomb. Nick barely spoke. When he did, it was short, sharp, and soaked in disbelief. He'd paced the living room with his phone in his hand, checking his accounts, waiting for a transfer that would never come. Emma tried to stay out of the way, watching from the hallway like a child witnessing a slow disaster she didn't understand. It was mid-afternoon when the first real explosion came. Nick came home early from school, the front door slamming so hard the frame shook. I was at the kitchen table working through paperwork, bills, loan statements, the dull necessities of survival. He burst in, voice already raised, the kind of fury that comes from entitlement, not pain. You canceled the tuition payments. He didn't ask. He stated it, as if I'd committed a crime. I didn't look up. Yes. His laugh was small, hollow. You think that's funny? You think this is some kind of game? No, I said. I think it's reality. He took a step closer. His face was red, eyes glassy. You can't just cut me off. College starts next month. I already signed my lease. I've got fees, deposits. I folded the papers neatly and set them aside. Then talk to your father. That stopped him, just for a second. His mouth opened, then closed again. He can't. Then you'd better figure something out, I said, because I'm done. Sarah entered halfway through, wiping her hands on a dish towel, voice trembling with that same mix of anger and fear she always carried when she had to choose sides. Tom, she said, don't do this. Not to them. Not to them. I repeated. They did it to me first. She shook her head. You're punishing them for being kids. You're supposed to be the adult. I was, I said quietly. For 6 years, I was the only adult in this house. Her face went pale. Nick threw his hands up, muttering something under his breath, then stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The sound of his door slamming came a few seconds later. The house went still again. Sarah leaned against the counter, staring at the floor. You can't just turn your back on them. I'm not turning my back, I said. I'm finally facing the truth. She didn't reply. That night, she slept in the guest room. I didn't ask her to. The next morning, I woke to find her gone. No note, no text. Just gone. The coffee pot was still half full, the house too quiet. It was almost noon before I heard her car pull into the driveway again. When she walked in, she didn't look at me. She went straight upstairs. Later, I found out she'd gone to see Alex. He lived across town, in a rundown two-bedroom house with paint peeling off the siding. He was the ghost that had haunted our family for years, the man whose absence had been my inheritance. I imagined her sitting in his living room, the same way she once sat in mine, explaining how the kids were struggling, how Tom's lost his way. I could picture Alex nodding, pretending to care, already rehearsing excuses. By evening, I had my confirmation. The front door opened, and Nick walked in carrying a small duffel bag. Behind him, Alex stood on the porch. He hadn't changed much, the same smirk, the same cheap cologne, the same hollow confidence. He didn't step inside. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. "Nick's staying with me for a while," he said. I looked past him, at Sarah standing behind Nick, eyes red but dry. She didn't meet my gaze. "Fine," I said. That single word seemed to catch them off guard. They wanted a fight, a scene, something to justify the story they'd already written about me. But I gave them nothing. Alex hesitated. "You don't have to be an asshole about it." I smiled. Small, quiet, humorless. "You've been gone for 6 years, and I'm the asshole?" He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm just trying to help. You should have started earlier." For a moment, he looked like he might respond, but then he just turned and walked away. Sarah followed him out. Nick didn't say goodbye. The door closed, and I was alone again. The silence that filled the house wasn't painful this time. It was honest. I spent that night cleaning. Not because it needed it, but because I needed to move. I cleared the dining table of the clutter that had built up. The unpaid bills, the old mail, the empty wine glasses. I packed away the photo frames, the ones that showed smiles that had never reached their eyes. I didn't throw them out. I just turned them face down. For the first time, I saw the house as it really was mine. Every beam, every screw, every drop of paint. It had always been mine. I'd built this life, and they had simply lived inside it. 2 days later, the calls started. Sarah first, then Emma, then Nick, though his came last. I didn't answer the first few. I let them ring. I listened to the messages pile up, each one a different shade of desperation. Sarah's voice began calm, pleading. "You can't do this, Tom. He's just a kid." Then it turned sharp, angry. "You think this makes you a man? You're cruel." Emma's messages were softer. "Please, Tom. Mom's really upset." Nick's scared. He doesn't know what to do. Nick's was short. "You win." That was all. But I hadn't been playing to win. I just stopped losing. When Sarah finally showed up at the house again, she looked tired, older somehow. She sat across from me at the table, the same table where I'd once laid out the receipts like evidence. Her hands were shaking. "Alex can't handle it," she said. "He doesn't have the money. Nick's tuition, the rent, he can't do it." "I know." "Then help him," she said. "Please." I shook my head. "No." Her voice cracked. "Tom, he's your son." I cut her off. "He's not my son. You made that clear." The words stopped her cold. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the clock ticking behind us. Finally, she stood, her eyes glassy but dry. "You're not the man I thought you were." I met her gaze. "Neither are you." When she left, I didn't follow. That night, I went through the house again, room by room, collecting the things I'd bought for them. Clothes, sneakers, laptops, even the little things. I stacked them neatly in boxes, taped receipts to the lids. Proof of purchase. Proof of everything. In the morning, I loaded the boxes into my truck. The sky was gray, heavy with rain. I drove across town to Alex's house. The grass was knee-high, the porch cluttered with beer cans. When I knocked, he opened the door in a stained t-shirt, eyes half-lidded from sleep. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "Yours," I said. He looked at the boxes, then at me. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "Figure it out," I said. Nick appeared behind him, expression blank. He didn't look angry anymore, just empty. For a second, I thought he might say something. He didn't. I turned back to the truck, the rain beginning to fall. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in the mirror. Alex standing on the porch, Nick beside him, both of them watching me go. Neither moved to wave. Neither stepped inside. They just stood there, like statues guarding a ruin. When I got home, the house was quiet. Sarah hadn't returned. The rooms echoed when I walked through them. But the quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was peace. For years, I'd thought love was something you could prove with sacrifice. That if you gave enough, endured enough, you'd earn your place. But the truth is simpler, crueler. Love without respect is slavery. And I'd finally quit being a slave. A week after I left those boxes on Alex's porch, the world went still. The house felt larger, hollow in places I'd never noticed before. Every footstep echoed. Every breath carried. I'd walk past the empty bedrooms and pause, waiting for some sound. A laugh, a door slam, a voice calling for money or food. But there was nothing. Just silence, wide and absolute. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. And what I heard was not pride. It was fatigue. The first few mornings, I woke before dawn out of habit, expecting to make breakfast, start the car, prepare the day for everyone else. Instead, I made a single cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching light crawl across the floorboards. The house was mine again, but ownership felt strange, like inheriting a kingdom after the citizens had fled. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I didn't. Freedom isn't triumph. It's aftermath. Comes with echoes. Comes with ghosts. On the second week, the mail arrived thick with reminders of the life I'd abandoned. Credit card offers addressed to Tom Collins and family, flyers for back-to-school sales, a photo envelope from the studio where we'd taken those forced holiday portraits. I opened one just to see. There we were. Sarah smiling too wide, Nick stiff beside her, Emma half hiding behind her mother's shoulder, and me, awkward, trying to belong. I looked like a man standing in a costume that didn't fit. I put the picture back in its sleeve and shoved it in the drawer. Some truths don't need framing. By the end of the month, the calls started again. First from Sarah, then from Emma. Sarah's messages were short now. We're figuring things out. Nick's working part-time. Alex can't help much. Beneath the words I could hear it. The exhaustion, the slow unraveling of the story she'd built. Emma's call was different. She didn't ask for money. She just wanted to talk. Her voice shook when she said my name. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, she began. But I wanted to say thank you for everything you did, for sticking around as long as you did. There was a pause, the sound of her breathing through the phone. Mom's trying. Nick's, I don't know. He doesn't say much. But I think he gets it now. I didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt foreign, almost dangerous, like a trap. I told her I was glad she was okay. She asked if she could visit sometime. I said, maybe. After the call, I sat on the porch until the sun went down. The lake across the road caught the last light, flat and gold. I thought about how simple the world looked when it wasn't filled with demands. Just water, sky, and time. Sometimes peace looks a lot like loneliness. A few days later, a letter came, handwritten, shaky script I recognized instantly. Emma again. She wrote that living with her real father wasn't what she'd imagined. The house was small, the fridge half empty, the promises thinner than the walls. She said Nick was angry all the time, that Alex drank more than he talked. She missed quiet breakfasts, missed order, missed the man who kept everything running even when no one noticed. She ended it with, I'm sorry for how we treated you. I know it's too late, but I just wanted you to know we see it now. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into the same box where I'd kept the receipts. It belonged there, not as forgiveness but as record. Proof that what I'd given hadn't been entirely invisible. I didn't write back. Some answers are better left implied. Months passed. Sarah sold the house across town and moved into a smaller place. The divorce papers arrived without ceremony. A plain envelope, no note. I signed them the same evening and left them on the counter for the courier. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was almost tender, like the sigh after a storm. Sometimes I still think about the moment it all turned. The kitchen, the sunlight, Nick's voice cutting through the air. "You're not a father, you're just a sponsor." He was right in his way. I had been a sponsor, a funder of comfort, a financier of affection. I'd believed money could build what blood refused to share. I'd mistaken provision for love, duty for belonging. But here's what he didn't understand. Sponsors eventually stop paying when the project fails. I still drive past Alex's street once in a while. The grass is shorter now, but the porch is sagging, the paint still flaking. Once, I saw Nick sitting on the steps, head in his hands. I didn't stop. There's nothing left to say. Whatever lesson he's learning out there, he has to learn it without me. Sarah wrote once, an email this time. Short, polite. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said the kids were finding their way. Then she added one line that stayed with me. "You were better to us than we deserved." I read it twice, then deleted it. Not out of anger, just completion. The story didn't need a sequel. I kept the house. I fixed the leaky roof myself, replaced the creaking steps, repainted the living room in quieter colors. I left one wall bare where the family photos used to hang. People notice it when they visit. They ask if I'm redecorating. I tell them no. Some walls are meant to stay empty, as reminders. Evenings are simple now. I cook for one. I read. I sleep through the night. Sometimes I hear laughter from the houses nearby. Families clinking dishes, arguing, making up, living. It doesn't hurt the way it used to. It just sounds distant, like music from another room. I don't regret leaving them. What I regret is how long it took me to see the truth. You can pour years into people who measure love by what they can take from you. You can sacrifice, bend, give, and still end up the villain when you finally say no. I used to think love was endurance. Now I know it's respect wearing patience as armor. The receipts, the letter, the photos, they're all stored in one box in the attic. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, I take it down. I open it, read a line or two, hold the evidence of a life I tried to build, then close it again. Not to mourn, just to remember, because forgetting would mean none of it mattered. And it did. It mattered enough to destroy me, and then to rebuild me. The other day, a neighbor stopped by. An older man, widowed, raising his granddaughter alone. We talked on the porch about bills, repairs, the small routines of solitary men. When he left, he said, "You must miss having people around." I told him the truth. I miss being needed, but I don't miss being used. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. When night falls, I still ask myself the question that never goes away. It sits at the edge of every quiet moment, whispering through the dark. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to stop paying, to pull the plug on the illusion, to make them face the weight of their own contempt? Was I wrong to trade the noise of a family for the calm of solitude? Some nights I think yes. Other nights, when the air is still and the world finally feels honest, I think no. Maybe being a father isn't about blood, or money, or patience. Maybe it's about knowing when to stop pretending. So I ask you, if you'd been in my place, surrounded by people who smiled while they hollowed you out, who loved what you gave but never who you were, would you have stayed? Or would you have walked away, like I did, into the silence that finally told the truth?